Huh? What? Man, who pressed the record button? Oh, man. Okay. I was taking a nap. Welcome to Chess, ladies and gentlemen. Malika Young Park Dotting saw my chess, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Yeah, man. You know, I was taking a nap. Somebody just hit the record button. I don't know who that could have been. Was it me? Crazy, man. Anyway, so I have the round 3 game for you between Wesley and Levon Aronian. You know, old rivals, I guess you can put it. So as always, for my people that are from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Masaya akong mukita kang muli. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video, aking mga kaibigan. Ingat lagi. Best wishes to everybody. Magandang umaga, magandang hapon, magandang araw. Appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. Anybody who is coming from Armenia, I will say Vogjuven to you, and Nch Ba6, and merci for coming by and taking a look at my video. Appreciate you guys very much. Yeah, so if you guys are ready to go, as you guys are aware, Levon Aronian did say he was moving to the United States, but he is not representing the U.S. yet. So he still has the Armenian flag on him. But at some point, it's going to look like Wesley. So I'll have the United States flag and I'll have a little Armenian flag down here. Those of you that are wondering, and I will change my chess legend probably tomorrow. But yeah, if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. It's a little bit shorter than the last game, so we're getting shorter and shorter, so that's good. E4, E5, knight comes to F3, knight to C6, bishop to C4. We got bishop to C5, C3, knight to F6, and we do have D4. So we have the Giuoco piano, and this is the center attack. You know, a lot of the times you have like a D3, C3 situation that comes up when you see the so it'd be the Giuoco pianissimo. But this is just another kind of way to play the deal. So pawn takes D4, pawn takes D4. You have bishop to B4 with check. You know, throwing a nice little in-between move in there. Bishop takes D2, and now you have knight takes E4. So it seems like he wins a pawn, but there's a nice little combination that comes up after this. We have bishop takes B4, knight takes B4, and then bishop takes F7. And, you know, fire on the board. King takes F7, and then we do have queen to B3 with check. And so this is allowing us to pick up this knight. So, I mean, it's about equal. I mean, it's not too great. I mean, white does have this isolated pawn. So it can be kind of questionable as far as their position goes, like in an in-game or something. We do see D5 just blocking that check. We throw an in-between move of knight to E5 check in first. King comes to E6, and then now we have queen takes B4. We have queen to F8, trying to trade the position down. And then also being sneaky, trying to threaten a little mate down here. Or not a mate, but, you know, like a really inconvenient check. Queen takes F8, rook takes F8, and we do have F3. So this is knocking the knight somewhere. Knight comes to D6. We have knight to C3, knight to F5, throwing a little attack on that isolated pawn down there. And we do have rook to D1. It was also possible just to castle queenside. You know, that's been something. C6 comes just to make the structure solid. However, it was a little bit more aggressive to actually try to break up the structure altogether with the C5. Not the typical situations that you see where a C5 comes, but you know, you guys you know, are seeing that this pawn is the only thing that is supporting the knight. So why not try to undermine it? So the knight would most likely move because, like I said, the pawn is going to get taken out from under him. Pawn takes D4, knight to B5, king up to E7, and then knight to C3. And black actually has an extra pawn at the moment. It's going to be dropping at some point, but, you know, at least you have, you know, a little bit more of a convenient situation as black. A little bit more aggressive, but like I said, we do have C6. King comes to F2, and this is a perfect little, like, you know, nook for the king to hide in. King comes to D6. We have rook H to E1. So white is a little bit further ahead than black at the moment. I mean, they do have this rook on this open file. This rook is not as good. It's on a half open file, but, you know, both sides are doing all right. And then we have G5 now, and G5 is the novelty of the game. I believe that G6 has been played before, but G5 is a brand new move. You know, if you can actually get like G3 and F4 in, you know, it was going to just kind of like solidify this knight in the center of the board. So that's something that looks like Levon was trying to avoid. We do have G4 knocking the knight over, and this knight is actually a little bit grim on the rim here. King comes to G3, B6, knight down to E2. We have bishop to A6, knight to G1, rook to F6, and then we do have a pretty nice pawn break, which is F4. And of course, you're not going to take because you're going to be looking at the the knight getting just completely lost. So we're not going to do that. So you see H6 just reinforcing the pawn on G5. You know, knight to H3. Now, if we back up here, instead of H6, you don't want to take knight takes F4 because you're going to be looking at knight to H3. And once this rook moves somewhere, you're actually going to be taking back the, you're going to be taking the pawn here. And it's going to be putting black in kind of a curious situation because this knight is going to become very loose. So it's going to force some pretty defensive play by black. Like I said, we did see H6, knight to H3, and then we have rook to G8, just trying to make sure that we reinforce that pawn on G5 as much as possible. We have B4. On a good day, you know, we can push A4 and maybe like, you know, A5, maybe like, you know, we have a situation possibly where A4 can come up and then, you know, if we're able to take this pawn here, the king would come over, and then we would have the support we need for the little fork here on B5. That's kind of like a dream. It's not something that's going to really legitimately be coming up because the bishop does come to B5. We see rook to D2. You want to make sure you're very careful because you do have rooks, and the opposite, the opponent does have a bishop. So you want to make sure that you're playing on the dark squares with these rooks because you definitely don't want to get pinned. You know, you don't want to line your rooks up on the same diagonal on the light squares. I've done it before and it hurts. I don't know if you guys have done it, but I've done it and it sucks. So we have A5, pawn takes A5, pawn takes A5. We got rook over to F2. We see A4, pawn takes G5, rook takes F2, king takes F2, and then we do have pawn takes G5. You know, this rook is still pretty good on this file. This rook has the ability to kind of swing over and stuff like that. So it's a pretty interesting position. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video and see what Wesley So plays in this position, it's a nice little kind of tricky little move that he plays. If you want to go ahead and try to guess that, go ahead and do so real quick. All right, cool. So it might kind of seem like this rook is holding down this pawn pretty well, but it is actually a loose pawn. And there is a tactical reason behind the fact that it is loose. So if you guess knight takes G5, that is exactly what Wesley So played in the game. So you think like Wesley So at least. But of course, you don't want to take on G5 because then you're going to look at knight to F7 with check, and that's a oops because now you are just losing your rook. You know, you are up an entire pawn as well. So that's not where you want to be at as black. So we actually see bishop to C4, trying to encourage a capture here. And then we can get like a pass pawn situation possibly rolling. But we do have A3, just making sure that we put this pawn on a dark square. So, I mean, you know, white has enough of their pawns on dark squares where, you know, they're not really too much worried about being attacked and stuff like that. So the knight comes to G6. We do see knight G to F7 with check. King comes to C7. We see knight takes G6. Rook takes G6. And we see G5. This knight is holding this pawn together pretty well. And we are looking at like some H4, H5 situations coming. So, you know, you can get put in a very defensive position pretty quickly as black. C5. Trying to break, you know, trying to get a pass pawn over here on the queen side. Pawn takes C5, rook to G8. We see H4. So like I said, I mean, we're going to get these pawns rolling. D4, knight comes to E5. Bishop to D5. We see king to G3. Rook to B8. Rook to D1. Rook to B3 with check. Rook blocks on D3. Bishop to E4. And so we trade on B3. Pawn takes B3. And then we have knight to C4. Now, you know, we're good on the dark square here. You know, you don't really have the ability to push the pawn. You also don't have the ability to push this one. So we do have bishop to D3. Knight comes to B2. We see bishop to C2. But this actually puts the bishop in a really kind of weird spot. And you'll see what I mean coming up pretty soon. We have H5, and now these pawns are actually really starting to roll. You have king to C6, G6, king takes C5. You have king to f4, and at the moment you are kind of holding these pawns at bay because if you try to push the pawn, the bishop is going to come on the side of it and make sure that it's prevented from advancing, and the king is going to be able to kind of shimmy its way back. But we do have king to d6, king comes to g5, so now this king is really going to start trying to push these pawns home. We have king to e7, we have h6. And now, this bishop is really blocked. And so you're threatening to just queen the pawn in 2 moves. So the king has to take drastic measures. King comes to f8. We see king to f6. King to g8. We see h7 with check. We see king to h8. And then we see g7 with check. And it is in this position that Levon Aronian does resign the game. And you resign the game simply because the only move that you can make as black is king takes h7, and then you're going to be looking at king to f7, and there is no way to prevent this pawn from promoting. And it is just, that's all she wrote. You're going to be, it's a pretty simple mating situation. You would probably try to run this way. You'd promote your pawn, there's really not a lot of good moves to make. You can definitely get checked here and then just pick up this pawn, and then it's just a matter of just getting rid of this pawn. So it's just not a really nice position to really be in as black. So it's a pretty nice straightforward game. Had some nice tactical ideas and stuff like that in it. But yes, as always, for my people in the Philippines, I didn't go very long, so this is going to be a little bit shorter video. So these good mornings for you. So maanyong buntag, mayad na agahan, naibeg na bigat, masanto siya kabason, marhe na aga, buenos dias, maanyong aga, mapia na uma, kapian kapuno dios, mayap a abak, mayad na aga, mapia agay, mapia kapapita, my big abukla, marja na buntag, marya my nat, malpe na aga, kasanyangan si elobi, salam, assalamu alaikum to you. And you see, even though I haven't done them in a few weeks, I still got them up here. So that's what's up. So I appreciate you guys very much. Makita Tayo Mamaya and Pa'alam, and I will see y'all next time.